One particularly fine morning, the kind when the sunlight sparkles in the dew of the fresh green grass, and your lungs get filled with oxygen-laden air as you draw in the clean, earthy scent of Africa, I left our caravan and set out into the forest with my binoculars. I searched for the trogon, and as usual, having no success and deciding to cut my losses, I walked along the edge of one of the forest glades. At the time, this seemed like a good idea. I could view both forest and grassland birds. As I walked out of the forest, however, I spooked a herd of duggerboys, each looking about as grumpy as Donald Trump himself. They are the most dangerous and feared animal in Africa, and this I knew all too well from my run-ins with buffalo in the Timbavati. Thankfully, though, these duggerboys gave me little more than a disdainful snort as they ran off and disappeared from view. I continued my foray along the forest verge, looking for birds and just generally enjoying life. After a while, I caught up with the same buffalo herd, which, upon realizing that I was following them, abandoned their grassy breakfast and veered off, retreating into the forest. Not many minutes later, I was surprised to hear a rustle from within the dark interior, adjacent to me. My eyes were accustomed to the brightly lit grassland, and as my pupils dilated slowly, I strained, peering into the gloomy forest from whence had come the rustle. Once my vision adjusted, I made out the dark, sadistic shape of a large duggerboy, and he was staring straight at me. The bull walked forward, and the familiar sensation of someone, maybe God himself, having hit the slow motion button again, kicked in. Everything slowed down. My thoughts became clearer. In fact, they became crystal clear as I realized that I was in quite a predicament. The buffalo walked forward towards me with his head held high. Illuminated by a shaft of sunlight, I could see his wet, dripping nose covered in bumpy black and shiny skin. I had not realized that the forest was so thick that it was in fact an impermeable wall of vegetation. This meant that I had inadvertently cornered one of Africa's most dangerous animals. Having worked as a trails guide, I knew that I was not to run, and that now was the time to shoot the animal, before its head came down. Instinctively, the muscle memory from my trail ranger days kicked in, and I raised my arm, as if raising a rifle. The only problem was that all I held in my hand was a tiny pair of 9 by 35mm binoculars. Without a rifle, I might need to run, I thought, as the bull continued slowly walking towards me. His massive sweeping horns were shiny and deeply grooved. He was a formidable foe, a heaving mass of pure muscle. Hunters have always feared buffalo, because once their horns go down, a bullet cannot penetrate the thick horny boss easily. To make matters worse, once a buffalo has his head down and is running straight towards you, a heart shot is almost impossible. It is for this reason that many of Africa's most famous hunters have admitted to always remaining nervous when hunting buffalo, despite having lost this nervousness when hunting other big game. Buffalo are also fiercely tough creatures. More hunters in Africa have been killed by buffalo they thought was dead than by any other African animal. I was not even a hunter. I was just a birder, and with all this buffalo trivia racing through my head, I watched with alarm as the bull dropped his head and charged. This was no mock charge. It was the real thing, and the beast had his sights locked on me. He was one seriously pissed off bovid, who had not appreciated his breakfast being disturbed twice. Finding himself cornered between the forest and a bipedal creature, he was now taking matters into his own hands. As mentioned, ad nauseum, the theory in Africa is to never run, and this is all fine and well, but I live by another motto too. This one says, common sense must always prevail. And common sense was telling me to get the hell out of there, and fast. One of Hap's hunting stories was about a hunter who had leapt into a tree to escape a charging animal. Once the danger had passed, his fellow hunters measured the distance from the ground to the branch he had jumped into. To do so, the man had to stand on the bonnet of a Land Rover. The conclusion to be reached is that with adrenaline coursing through one's veins, a person is capable of the impossible. With this story in the back of my mind, and with no trees to climb, I turned and ran down the hill. I will outrun this bastard, were my last thoughts, before I face planted into the side of the hill.